This is a three-man job at least, Valerian grumbles, for at least the third time. He is woefully out of his element, perched here atop the spires of Palace Fargalay, and he knows it. What was Montessario thinking, sending me out on a mission like this? I'm a lover, not a powder-man. Sallow, who very much is a powder-man, is lost in his work, humming happily to himself as he sets another pack of charges. Valerian watches him work testily. Is this even going to work? I mean, how does setting charges on the palace roof result in that pompous ass Fargalay, or at least the skin shifter playing him, getting his ticket punched? Sallow glances up, though his deft fingers never stop working. It's really quite simple. The roof isn't just a cap on a building like this, you see. It ties all the columns, vaults and walls together. If the roof structure loses integrity suddenly, in multiple places, it stops distributing the weight evenly. Add to that the fact that I've positioned the charges over the key Grand Hall columns, the central vault, and both the load-bearing stair towers, and what we end up with when we trigger a simultaneous detonation is a progressive collapse as the top level falls, adding far more force than the structure was designed to bear, and each subsequent floor below fails in sequence. Everyone inside will be flattened. Quite elegant, really. Valerian is only half listening. His attention has been drawn to a commotion in the courtyard. He peers over the lip of the roof, then glances back at Sallow. This plan of yours, elegant as it is, may have one minor flaw. Sallow looks puzzled. I don't think so, Valerian. I've considered all the structural variables. That's as maybe, Valerian responds, but unless I miss my guess, it all rather goes to shit if Lord Fargalay isn't in the building. He gestures downwards. Sallow joins him in time to see a heavy, horse-drawn carriage decked out in the Fargalay colours of silver and blue and sporting the mailed fist coat of arms pulling up before the palace steps. A dozen mounted guards stand at the ready. There, striding out through the grand palace doors and down the sweeping marble steps towards the carriage, is the resplendent figure of Lord Rufus Fargalay, their target, and he's escaping the trap. Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide, as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Lone Adventurer RPG rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning. The following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer. Martial law gripped the city of Kairos. The web reconvened to discuss the intelligence Mina had recovered, only to be interrupted by Heart of Snow, bearing dire warnings. He demands that Mina, and Mina alone, take responsibility for assigning strike teams and tasks in the Seek and Destroy missions to come. But she is not alone. Within their shared host, it transpires that the Doomspire avatar is becoming inextricably linked with Mina at a cognitive level. Barely 5 minutes into our first mission, and already the wheels are off and bouncing down the road. I started this episode by figuring out which teams would go after which targets, and then decided the order in which to visit those teams. I then provided my team members with some downtime activities. Recovery in Valerian's case, and a prepare action in Sallow's, which he used to create a +1 asset called High Explosives. You see, my intention for this scene was for Sallow and Valerian to set the explosive charges with the intention of bringing the house down on the first of their shape-shifting foes. Only When I checked in with the Scene Start Oracle, I got a yes, but, and my Deep Oracle provided the following clarification: the keywords movement, change or action, along with wealth, success or leadership. Taken together, that seemed pretty obvious. The wealthy leader, read Lord Fargalay, had decided to move, just in time to stymie the plans to drop a palace on his head. I notice that, once again, my PCs have made no rolls so far this session. They made none at all last episode, and only one in the episode before that, though the one that they made was a doozy. Instead, a great deal of the unpredictability in the recent narrative is coming from the GM side of the table. Scene starts not going as expected, or clarification questions throwing up unanticipated developments. I don't expect that to last for very much longer, as the onus is placed much more firmly now upon my PCs to act in pursuit of their goals, and so there will be greater need for them to test themselves against the world to start to make rolls. Before we come to that, though, a brief word on House Fargalay. It's perhaps unlikely that you will recall that name, but this is not the first time the noble house has featured on this podcast. They got a blink-and-you'll-miss-it name check way back in episode 3 of season 1, and then appeared twice in the show notes, first as one of the possible locations that Cadmus and Mina might emerge into when they escaped from the Underpipes back in season 1 episode 8, and then again as one of the houses Umajukti might hail from back in season 1 episode 13. In both cases, the answer turned out to be House Tereth. But House Fargalay have been around for quite a lot longer prior to that. They were one of the 4 great houses that were named when Kairos was put together as an adventuring location for a 7th Sea campaign that my friend Stefan ran. Now it seems that they are finally back, with the result of some random rolls last episode to see who the unseen had suborned. How will Sallow and Valerian manage this setback to their plans? Well, why don't we find out? Death and damnation, Sallow mutters to himself, fingers fluttering about his face as he mentally scrambles for a solution. His eyes dart to the explosives carefully placed at key points across the palace roof. He can't leave. How can his house fall on him if he leaves? My point exactly, Valerian nods, lying flat on the roof and peering down over the edge. Where the hell is he going? And why now of all times? He is so intent upon observing his quarry that he is completely oblivious when, behind him, Sallow rummages through his pack, pulls out a brass ball the size of a grapefruit, and lights the fuse. Valerian's eyes narrow as something in Lord Fargalay's bearing and body language trigger realization. The man is anxious, afraid. Despite attempts to keep an illusion of control, the heavy-set man is running, which can only mean... Well, he won't be able to leave if we blow up his fancy cart, Sallow reasons, and stands with his arm cocked back, ready to toss his grenade. Valerian's eyes go wide with horror as he belatedly realizes what the twitchy sapper is up to. "Sallow, no!" he squawks, springing up and wrestling with his companion for the fizzing explosive. "Put it out! Put it out!" It is a minor miracle that none of the men assembled in the courtyard choose at that moment to look up. As it is, not one of them notices the 2 members of the web locked in a desperate struggle on the rooftop several stories up, standing silhouetted by the light of the moon with a sparking bomb between them. Sallow blinks in confusion, but eventually acquiesces. He pulls a small set of cutters from a pocket and neatly snips the fuse. The 2 men drop to their haunches, panting for breath. "But Valerian, he's going to get away," Sallow wheedles. "If we blow up his carriage, at least there's a chance he'll go back inside for safety, and then we can blow up the roof." 3 problems with that plan, even if you were able to destroy the carriage with your grenade, Valerian hisses back. Firstly, there's no guarantee he would go back inside. He might just mount one of those horses and flee. I know that's what I'd do. And he'd now be armed with the certain knowledge that he was an assassination target. And second, even if he did go back inside, we'd be surrounded with no way off this rooftop. I don't know about you, but I'd plan to be a goodly distance away when we set off these charges. Sallow tilts his head to one side as he works all that through. Fair, I suppose. What's the third problem? For the first time in quite a while, Valerian grins. The third problem is that if you toss a grenade at him now, we would be able to follow him to his unseen safe house and catch him and his co-conspirators all together in one neat package. I'd seen this scene, beginning with Lord Fargalay hopping into his waiting carriage and setting off, which of course would have thrown the onus on the party to figure out their response. My scene start oracle was not so sure. No, it said, not exactly, but something positive happens instead. Oh, and here are some key words to ponder while you figure out what. Those words being solitude, introspection, reflection, completion, fulfillment, and enlightenment. I confess that staring at that lot, I didn't feel in any way enlightened, at least until I switched perspectives away from Lord F and onto my PCs. This scene wasn't going to be about what the Lord was up to, but what was happening on the rooftop. And what was happening on the rooftop was twofold. In isolation, each of my party members was going to reach a conclusion about how to solve this problem and independently act on it with hilarious consequences. Sallow was easy. His solution to this knotty conundrum, as ever, was to blow it up. Valerian was a little trickier, though. After a bit of head-scratching, I decided he had read his mark and figured out that the unseen agent was bolting for safety, which in turn meant that the agent knew that they were at risk and had somewhere to bolt to. And if this agent was aware of danger and making a run for a safe house, then it stood to reason that others in the cell might be doing the same. Therefore, Valerian thinks, simply follow the mark back to their lair and take out all of the rats in a single trap. Of course, all of this is pure speculation on Valerian's part. There may be any number of other reasons that explain Lord Fargalay's actions equally well. Valerian is just going with his gut, as did Sallow. The conflict this parallel processing led to was on the one hand amusing to me as a player. There is nothing like a little PvP shenanigans while the enemy stands deadly but oblivious nearby. On the other hand, this was a really high-risk situation. Not only were they at high risk of being discovered, but they were fighting over a bomb that could easily have blown the pair of them into a fine red mist. Thankfully, both of the rolls they needed to make to overcome these dire threats came up golden, a straight success both times. And so now we have a new mission for our dynamic duo. They need to tail Lord Fargalay and his heavily armed entourage through a city under total military lockdown to an unknown location without getting spotted or losing their target, and then figure out how to launch an assault on wherever they hopefully eventually find themselves. All in all, I'm coming to the conclusion that Sallow probably had the better plan. Where the hell is Trace when you need her? I told you this was a three-man job. Valerian has been griping pretty much non-stop for the last 5 minutes, but on this point at least he isn't far wrong. Having the Web's tracker along for this part of the mission would have certainly made life easier. Sadly for Valerian, an easy life is the one thing he can be absolutely certain of not having. If he thinks back, his life of late has been a never-ending string of crises, calamities, and bowel-loosening terror. If it's not armed guards, leaping vampires, or blood-crazed zombies trying to kill him, he seems doomed to face horrible death at the hands of his so-called allies. What, he asks himself for the umpteenth time, could he possibly have done to deserve all this? Valerian? Sallow mutters, peering down at the cobbles and then up each branch of the T-junction they have just reached. I think we might have lost them. Valerian is about to launch into a fresh round of invective when he spots something that makes his heart sink further. Sallow, get back! Look, do you see there in the alleyway off Bleak Street, and there in the shadows beneath that awning? Sallow does indeed, the unmistakable glint of armour. Those polished breastplates of the guards do wonders, projecting an air of prestige and power, but they do very little for camouflage. An ambush? They know we're on their tail? Possibly, Valerian muses, but not necessarily. It may just be a precaution to ensure they're not followed. Either way, though, they picked an excellent spot to do it. If we double back and go round, Fargalay is likely to be long gone by the time we bypass his little welcoming committee. Damn it. Sallow grins. Worry not, and follow me, Valerian. I have this under control. He rummages through his numerous pockets. Now, where did I put that thing? And with that, he steps out onto the street and, whistling, marches cheerfully up directly to the two poorly concealed guards. Valerian, caught by surprise, can do nothing but scamper along in his wake, desperately hoping against all evidence to the contrary that Sallow knows what he's doing. As they reach Bleak Street, the guards step from the shadows and draw their swords.
Where do you two think you're going? Don't you know there's a curfew on? I don't fancy your chances if a patrol catches you out at this time of night. Best fuck off back where you come from, if you know what's good for you.
Sallow bobs his head in acquiescence and pulls his hands from his pockets. A heavy steel canister is clutched in one of them.
What the fuck's that?
The guard barks, taking a step back. This, Sallow replies with a nervous giggle. Oh, it's really clever. Look! He tosses the canister to the startled guard, who catches it on instinct. An instant later, there is a deafening bang and a blinding flash of light that leaves all of them utterly disoriented. With tears streaming from his eyes and his head ringing like a bell struck by a sledgehammer, Valerian is just about able to make out Sallow's puzzled voice over the roaring in his ears. A flashbang? I could have sworn that was a smoke bomb. And then there is another sound, one that sends Valerian's already descending heart plummeting all the way down to his boots. 3 shrill whistle blasts. An Imperial patrol. Nearby. Shit! Is it just me? Or does Sallow somehow manage to screw up everything they attempt? I'm sure I've reflected on this back in Season 2, but sometimes the frequency with which Sallow screws up dice rolls makes me wonder if those dice are trying to tell me something. And let us not forget, he did do the dirty on the party once before. Could the party's saboteur be trying to sabotage the party? For once, this scene started as expected, with our heroes tracking the convoy through the city. But it took no time at all for things to go horribly wrong. I had Sallow make a tracking roll, which was a straight failure. A couple of quick rolls on my GM soft move table resulted in foreshadow a danger and make them choose. And with results like those, there was no need to consult the Deep Oracle. I immediately envisaged guards lying in ambush, and that avoiding them would mean a high risk of losing their quarry. Surely, I said to myself, this must be Sallow's time to shine. A quick smoke bomb to blind the guards, and they could sneak off in the confusion, easy as you like. Using his crafting skill, along with his very respectable smith stat of 2, Sallow was bound to nail this roll, right? Naturally, this was delusional thinking, clearly the product of a fevered mind suffering from solo RPG Stockholm Syndrome. As night follows day, I rolled the dice and got a 3. With Sallow's +2 bonus, that gave me a grand total of 5, which was a straight failure. Of course, there was that crafting skill to consider. In the Lone Adventurer RPG, if you have an applicable skill, you can't miss. A roll of 6 or less counts as a partial success, but with a bigger compromise or complication than a 7 to 9 result. Which meant that yes, the guards were indeed temporarily incapacitated, but a roll on my GM hard move table gave me the result, have it backfire. This is a potent GM move. Turning the PC's own plans against them is often both deadly and quite funny. In this case, the fiction suggested to me that Sallow's action had impacted him and Valerian also. Now, if this had been a normal partial success, I might have ruled that Sallow had let off a smoke bomb, which ended up blinding and confusing our heroes just as much as the guards. But because this was a failure turned into a partial success by a skill, the consequence needed to be more severe. With the idea in mind that Sallow had accidentally let off a flashbang instead of a smoke bomb, I rolled with likely odds to see if all that noise had attracted any attention, and sure enough, I got a yes and. Not only had they caught the attention of an Imperial patrol, but that patrol was nearby. The stakes are raised, and peril is close at hand. Let's see how our plucky protagonists extract themselves from this latest fine mess they've gotten themselves into. Sallow, I love you like a brother, but you're a fucking liability. Run! The Weasley sapper doesn't need telling twice. Taking advantage of the guard's momentary disorientation and fighting through their own, Sallow kicks the guard closest to him square in the balls and then sets off at a dead sprint. Valerian follows suit. Though they can barely see where they are going, Sallow knows these streets like the back of his hand. Operating more on gut instinct than any rational sense of what he's doing, Sallow barrels down Bleak Street, arms and legs pumping, and it is all that Valerian can do to keep up. At this point, he cheerfully takes surviving the night over the success of their mission, but he can't entirely ignore that creeping sense of dread. If their mission fails, surviving subsequent nights is likely to grow progressively more difficult. These uncomfortable thoughts are interrupted by something more uncomfortable still. The 3 whistle blasts come again, and with them, faintly, a steady click, click, click. His vision clearing, Valerian risks a swift backward glance, and immediately, fervently wishes that he had not. Rounding the far end of the street and reaching Fargalay's downed guards come 3 burly Imperial troops, armoured and armed with far more sharp steel than Valerian really cares for. But it is not this trio that makes his blood run cold. That honour is reserved for the hunched figure that comes limping painfully around the corner in the soldier's wake. A figure who walks with a limp so severe he requires a cane, the source of that steady click, click against the cobbles. A figure so disfigured by the latticework of livid scars that cover his face that Valerian feels his gorge involuntarily rise. He accelerates, grabbing Sallow's arm and dragging him into the shadows of an alley in the instant that the hunched figure's head snaps up, sweeping the street with a piercing gaze. Valerian hopes against hope that they have not been spotted, that those 2 guards back there, blinking back tears and clutching their valuables, have served as sufficient distraction. Even as he does, his mind is feverishly catching up with him. The blue and white robes, that superior smirk, and even from this distance, that manic, fanatical gleam in the cold, dead eyes. Despite the urgency of the moment, Valerian is dragged back into a memory that he would do almost anything to avoid. The battle at the Opera House. Even with the patchwork ruination of his face, with the cruel destruction of his body, Valerian would recognize that man anywhere. It is Inquisitor Fonseca. I confess I am delighted to have good old Fonseca back in the mix. Lest we forget, our dear demented Drumian zealot was last seen being rescued by bluecoats from extended torture at the hand of Lord Tortimus's vampires, the Undying. That was back in Season 3, Chapter 8. And before that, everyone's favourite fanatic was beaten near to death by Crater all the way back in Season 2, Chapter 19. It's fair to say that Inquisitor Fonseca has had a bit of a rough ride of late. But happy days, here he is, back up on the horse and raring to go. Well done him. How did this all transpire, you ask? Well, as usual, I started this scene by checking to see if panicked fleeing was indeed the way things were going to go, and learned that there was a small fly in the ointment. To determine the nature of that fly, I drew from the Deep Oracle and was rewarded with the High Priestess reversed and the King of Swords reversed. Together, they spoke of irrationality, denial, superiority, snobbery, and even tyranny. And as I looked at them, Fonseca's face emerged. We had, after all, established that inquisitors were being assigned as commissars to imperial patrols. This seemed to make quite a lot of sense. The Holy Inquisition had got him back, patched him up, and sent him back out to do Droom's holy work. Fonseca was not on my NPC list, and so I've added him. And I've also added a new peril, fugitives. Because, if you recall, the Web were public enemies #1 for a while back there. During the Civil War, they were briefly the faces of the sedition and terrorism that were tearing the city apart. Given their very brutal history together, should he discover that they are back, there is no one who will be more motivated to see the party's utter destruction than Inquisitor Captain Julio Gabriel Fonseca. This is a deeply unwelcome development for my PCs, and a deeply welcome one for me. There is nothing better for a narrative in general, and for a tabletop RPG in particular, than having a hated and feared antagonist back in the mix. So welcome back, Inquisitor Fonseca. I look forward to seeing how you make my characters' lives more interesting. One last thing to mention. Looking back on the scene before last and Sallow's string of failures that led me to this point, I realise that I keep forgetting that each of my PCs has a fate point, which refreshes with each downtime. In the Lone Adventurer RPG, a fate point allows a player to re-roll any dice roll they have just made. In Sallow's case, I could have re-rolled that attempt to use the smoke bomb to escape, or, going back a stage further, I could have re-rolled his failed tracking roll that resulted in them meeting those guards who were lying in ambush. That is something I'll try to remember in future, but it does underline a truth of the solo RPG. Often, failure is much more interesting than success. Imagine all those rolls succeeding. Sure, we'd be hot on the heels of Fargalay's carriage, perhaps we'd have even found his bolt hole. But would we have got to blow ourselves up with a flashbang, or kick guards in the balls, or be reintroduced to the Inquisitor? I think, on balance, I'm glad I forgot my fate points, and that I'm going to change my rules to allow only one fate point per long rest total, not per PC. And let's face it, there is still plenty of opportunity for catastrophic rolling to come. Maybe it's a good thing that I've held on to that fate point that I've still got. Let's find out. Next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it, or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on BlueSky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com, or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.